Hey YouTube, Brian LCS. Welcome to the Comic Book Community 411, and my special guest is ComicCap. ComicCap, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to catch up with you. So before we jump into the questions, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your channel?
Okay, I started my comic book channel, I guess, about a year or so ago, and I actually started watching some pressing videos, and I was determined to buy a press and figure out how to use a press. So decided when I got a press, I was going to make some videos doing the same thing that somebody did for me. And I think the Jerry the Jitterbug, I don't know if you follow him. He was
Oh
probably
yeah.
one of the first pressing videos I watched that kind of got me into pressing books. Um, so I got, and then I kind of just keep it all comic book and Marvel related. Um, this way I can keep my audience entertained. They don't want to see a random stuff and just focus on comics.
Okay, great. So, and that leads into the first question, which is always the same. What or how did you get into comic book collecting?
Probably just same way almost everybody did, right? You got one as a kid. I should have busted it out. I still have my very first comic book I ever bought. It was Amazing Spider-Man 255, um, and it's destroyed. It's in terrible shape, but that's besides the point. But It got me into it, and then a couple years later, at the corner store, I was buying comics whenever I could. I ended up in an indoor flea market, and I saw a comic shop, and I was blown away. And I found out there was like back issues of Star Wars, and I was a big Star Wars fan, so that only pulled me in even more. And I was a pretty heavy collector from the age of, I don't know, I would say 9 until probably my teenage years when I started driving, and then it was kind of dwindled away little
Right.
by little. If I saw them, I would pick them up. I got married. I didn't have time to pick them up. I did subscribe to a couple X-Men along the way somewhere in there. And then when my son was probably 7, 8 years old, Dad, what are all these boxes? And then he got into it, and then that kind of kickstarted me right back into where I left off. And I've been back into it probably for about good 4 years, pretty heavy. So
Okay. Yeah, and I had a very similar story where collected till probably 16, 17, and then there's other priorities like you said, driving, high school, social life, onto college, things like that, and then you kind of lose touch, and then at some point you come back. I had a pretty long break, and then came back, but a lot of I've met very few people in the community who don't experience the same thing where they have a break like in their 20s and then eventually come back.
one crazy thing though is if I ever like passed a comic somewhere, I was like, I gotta buy it. I haven't bought a comic in a couple years. I'm buying this, read it, file it in the box, and so I eventually did pick up some pretty cool stuff over the years, just randomly.
Oh, that's cool. So how did you make the leap? So you said about 4 years ago you got back into collecting. So how did you make the leap to go from collecting and then saying, okay, I'm going to start my own, YouTube channel?
Well, crazy thing is my son got into YouTube at a young age. He was determined to have a YouTube channel when he was like probably 6, 7 years old. And I helped him with that. I helped him kind of build that up, and he was somewhat successful. He got up to about 1,100 subscribers.
Wow.
It's pretty good content on there. And then one day he just didn't want to do it anymore. I don't, for whatever reason, I didn't question it. So a couple years after that, I'm like, you know what? I could do this. I already know how to, do it for the most part. Not that I'm a professional editor or anything, but I know how YouTube works. So I figured, why not give it a shot and go from there? And
Okay.
at first, I was like, I'm not even showing my face because I don't want to be the star of the show. I want my books, I want my content to be the star of the show. But eventually, people want to see who the heck you are. So here I am.
All right. Yeah, and that's the one I enjoy watching. I watch a lot of content, comic book related content, but that's the one drawback that I've found is that because we're showing off, comic books and great covers and art, I when I'm doing stuff around the house, I used to, throw a pair of headsets in and listen to podcasts and things like that. But now that's been replaced with YouTube. But I can't just listen to it. I have because of the content, because of the
Yeah.
comic books. You have to watch it, right? Because you want to see the covers, the great art. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this type of show, an interview show, where it was less about comic books, showing comic books, and real more about talking to some, community members to get to know them a little bit better, and potentially maybe be just one of those shows that people, hopefully watch, but also just can listen to and not have to be so focused on, staring at the screen all the time.
Yeah, it's cool. And listen, one thing I got to say is, the comic book community is just awesome. Like I don't even know. I'm blown away by how great everyone is. I mean, everyone I've come across has just been supportive and awesome. And that goes from the big guys. I even messaged Comic Tom on Instagram, and he got back to me about something. So I thought that was cool. And then just everybody, everybody's very supportive. So it's very cool little secret society we got going on here.
Yeah, no, I've had the same experience. Anybody I've come across is been really, it's a very, like I said, it's a niche community, but it's a very supportive community. And like even some of the big channels, I've reached out to some of the channels to ask questions, or and most times they'll get right back to me. So which is I think unusual for bigger channels to help support some of the smaller channels. So what about a comic book, a book, a series, or even a character? If you had the control to be able to reboot or rewrite, what would you tackle?
Well, anybody that has watched all my content would know I'm a big Alpha Flight guy. So that was the first team book I ever read before I ever read an X-Men book, before I ever read an Avengers book. And I got sucked into it. And, growing up with other friends that, read comics and collected comics was like, why do you read that? It was kind of like, read X-Men, read Avengers. It's terrible. So I liked all the weird stuff. I liked Alpha Flight. I liked West Coast Avengers back in the 80s. But I would love to see Alpha Flight back in some form or fashion. Maybe not the original team, but somewhat of the original, and kind of branched off from there. Because there's really, I think they had a one shot back like 2 years ago. That was about the last we saw of them. And then they were in Gamma Flight for a bit. But other than that, non existent.
Okay. Yeah, I think I was first introduced to Alpha Flight through X-Men, through an X-Men book. Some crossover or team up, and then you know started reading Alpha Flight. Realized that, like you said, in the '80s that they had their own series, and John Byrne. I was a big in the '80s. I really enjoyed John Byrne's work, and so that I kind of gravitated towards things that he was working on, and obviously Alpha Flight was one of those. So what about one thing, something, and whether it's in the YouTube community or in collecting in general, one thing that you dislike or really don't care for?
There's a few. You know, CGC. Everybody likes the CGC labels, and they're the most desirable books. But sending a bunch of batches out to them, you think you're getting a high grade book, and then you get like an 8.0. Not that it's a low grade book, but you get an 8.0 and you get no explanation why it's an 8.0. That's deflating at times. Lead times right now. I mean, I one thing I could say, I don't know if this is going to answer your question. I may be going off topic here. I wish I bought more prior to COVID, because this crazy spike that we saw with COVID and everybody getting back into collecting a little bit, it's great, it's cool, but man, prices are gone up through the roof.
Oh yeah.
Ever since then, and it kind of backlogged these grading companies pretty bad. Like I have books out right now to CBCS that's been there for 10 months. So
Yeah, it's kind of a strange. We're kind of in that middle ground right now, because there's some books that have been submitted. I've seen people who have submitted books recently, and they've got them back very quickly, and then other books have been sitting for 7, 8, 9 months, a year. Um, so it almost looks like they've refined their process for some new stuff coming in, but still have a big chunk of backlog that they still need to
Mhm.
work through.
Yep.
So yeah, it's kind of strange. Okay, so you made it through the first four questions, the questions that I ask everybody. Now the next two are going to kind of be random. One I'll pick, and then one will just go to a list of questions and come up with a random question there. But my question my question for you is. What is the focus? So I was going back and looking at because I only recently discovered your channel, and so I was going back and looking at watching some of your older videos, and it seems like your focus has kind of been on some pressing and cleaning, and then some speculation.
Hmm.
So, do you have a main focus, or is it just hey, whatever's happening in collecting wise, and that's kind of what I run with?
I would say it's pretty much. I try to have a focus, but as stuff changes, I just try to do whatever I'm doing at that time. So if I'm pressing a key that I think people might want to see, obviously I'll do a video about that. But then if I have a batch that I'm deciding to send out or something, I like to do um, what I think the grades are before they even go out, and then do a review. I said this was going to be between an 8 and an 8.5, and this is what I got. Because the first batch I sent in, I was kind of like, wow. But then as you start to see how they grade and how they pick up on certain things, you get a little bit better at knowing what they're looking for and what to look for. Um, so I do like the pressing thing, and honestly, the pressing videos get me the most views. So which is great, But I do like doing other stuff too. Um, Speculation's weird, Sometimes you get flooded with people asking questions and stuff like that, and sometimes it just people aren't interested. So everybody kind of speculates. I mean, you could speculate over any major or minor character, thinking they may be coming to a movie or something, and it could be years and years away. So um, I don't really see it beneficial, even though I do like doing it. I know some people like, I'll do a spec video and they're like, stop speculating. Sorry.
All right. And now the pressing and cleaning, do you do that just for your own books, or do you do work for other people?
Currently, I just do it for my own books. I have had a couple people ask me to do it for them yet. I haven't, I've done it for some friends, obviously, but I haven't done it for like, charging anybody or anything like that. And the reason being is I only have one press. Anybody that does this, they typically have like four presses because depending on the type of book it is, some guys will tell you different. Some say you only have to leave it in for an hour after it cools off. I don't like doing that. I like leaving them in there like a good 8 hours at least because you don't want that book to revert back to what it
Right.
was before you pressed it.
Right.
So the longer it cools down and stays in that condition, the better you have it staying that way. If you take it out too soon, it'll look great when you take it out, and then the next day you'll look at it and it just won't look as good as it did when you take it out of the press. So in order to do it on the side, you need a fleet of presses to really do it.
Right. Okay. And like we said, with the long lead times at the grading companies, you don't want a book sitting in their warehouse and then revert. You know.
Yep.
All right. So my last question is, like I said, going to be a totally random question. So I have a list of 50 questions. So just give me a number, 1 through 50, and wherever we land, that'll be the question.
Let's go with lucky number 13.
13. Oh, this is an interesting one. Are you related or distantly related to anyone famous?
Mm, no, not really. Not that I could think of. Um, Roommates count? No, no, I'm not related to anyone famous.
Okay.
That
Well,
was,
did you have a famous roommate?
no, no. My my one aunt is somehow distantly related to Frankie Valley, but it's
Okay.
so distant. It's not. Doesn't even count. I don't even like to say it because it's like you try to cross the
Yeah.
lines and
I got you. All right. Well, that was it. You made it through all of the questions. So, what do you have coming up on your channel? Anything else you want to mention about your channel? I have all of your YouTube link and your Instagram link down in the description. So if people are not familiar with you, they can, check you out. But what do you have coming up on the channel?
What I have coming up is I do have I have a batch submission that I'm going to be sending out, and I'm doing getting all the whole fleet of custom labels from CGC. So I'm submitting them, and I'm going to be showing what labels I'm getting with which books. Um, because CGC, they break it down every time you separate the labels versus a different tier. They charge you double shipping. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do just labels. Send all books I want to get custom labels on at one shot. I'm going to send that in. I do have a couple nice keys that I want to press and do videos of pressing those, because people always like to see you work on an actual valuable book other than a garbage book. So
All right, great.
I don't want to spoil what they are, though.
Oh yeah, we'll leave that to the video so people will watch. And do you have? I have one other question. Do you have a favorite? I mean, I know you mentioned Alpha Flight, but do you have a particular favorite character?
Um, at the moment, it changes. As you read, it changes. I was a Wolverine fan just because of the whole Alpha Flight tie-in that went on for a long time. I was a big Deadpool guy. I didn't really like the last couple of volumes that were out, and I was never a Punisher fan. But this new volume, I'm hooked to. It is phenomenal, with the hand, and he no longer have fights with a gun. He's got swords, and
Right.
it's pretty epic. I'm enjoying it a lot. So if I had to say currently, I would say Punisher. I am still suckered into all the X titles. I'm
Hmm.
still reading them all. Um, I don't want to say I dislike them. I'm just not super wowed by them either. So, but I would say Punisher is on the top of my list at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's been a good read. I've been reading that. Spider Man's my guy, and I've had the similar, as you with the X Men, where I'm collecting it, but the last 2 years really hasn't wowed me. But he's Spider Man. He's my guy. I'm gonna collect it. So.
And I did enjoy the House of X, Powers of X story, and the story after that. But I feel like ever since X of Swords, or Ten of Swords, whatever you call it, it kind of just fizzled from there.
Fizzle, yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, great. It was really great chatting with you and getting to know you a little bit. Like I said, if you're not familiar with ComicCap, definitely check out links below for both his YouTube channel and Instagram. So please go give him a follow, give his videos a watch and a like and a comment. And thanks. I appreciate you taking the time to come on and getting to know you a little bit.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate you having me.
All right.
My
Well,
pleasure.
thanks everyone. We'll see you next episode. Take care.